I have a bit of a story for you guys. When I was in the country of Belize, I actually almost died. Like 100%. This is not a I almost died? Not clickbait. Like I almost did. But let me tell you the story before we get to the end of it, you know. I went to Belize with my dad. We had some fun, and we show up to where we're staying, and we stop by the front counter, and we're like, "Hey, what is there to do?" And they were like, well, we do a couple of things. We do ATV riding, which is fun for the entire family." And my dad and I were like, "Oh, that sounds kind of fun. Do you want to do that?" And they were like, yeah, so you can do that in like right now. Who's not going to take that opportunity to go ATV riding in the jungles of Belize? Belize is a great country, by the way. We get in the car, or the shuttle that the place we're staying at runs, and we meet our driver named Alex. And my dad gets to know Alex. You know, my dad is one of those like classic dads that talks to anybody and everybody he can. So I'm just sitting in the back of the shuttle doing nothing, and my dad is just like, "Yeah, so Alex, how long have you worked here?" And Alex is this young kid, right? Not too young, but pretty young, early 20s. And so he's driving this shuttle, just agreeing with whatever my dad says, because what else are you gonna do? And we finally get to the ATV place, and it's a little bit of back and forth to try and get to where we're going, to like actually get on the ATVs. We signed some papers, you know, some things that say if we get hurt or killed, then it's not their fault. And who's not gonna sign that? We start to get all our gear. I get goggles for my eyes because I'm the only one without sunglasses. We start to get going on the ATVs. I hop on, and my dad hops on, and we also happen to have a group going with us, a group of 4 people, but only 2 of them were actually driving. The other 2 were their girlfriends. So there was one guy on an ATV with his girlfriend on the back, and then another guy on an ATV with his girlfriend on the back. And I guess they had been there a couple times because there were a little bit of hotheads, if I'm using that word correctly. They were very immature about the learning process of how to use ATVs. And obviously, I don't know how to use an ATV. I'm trying my best to listen. I'm trying to listen to every single word that our guide says. And they're off to the side just being idiots. And then my dad is also sitting there. And the guide, you know, he's like, "Hey guys, calm down. They need to listen." And the people who we were going with were like, "Oh no, we already know everything." And the guide was very serious, like, "No, these people don't, so they need to listen." Which is correct. I don't know how to ride an ATV. This is my first time. And keep in mind, this place was advertised as a family-friendly thing. So we were not going on some dangerous adventure trip. We start to get going after all the safety things. And I am terrible on an ATV. Let me tell you that. Or I was at first. Let me create a visual for you guys, okay? I'm like this. That's a pretty painful position to be in, and also uncomfortable. So I was just like kind of slowly like driving along, and my dad and I insisted that we stay behind all the experienced riders. So the 2 couples were in front of us and the guide was in the front of the line. While the guide was driving, he would put up whatever gear you needed to be in. Like whatever, if you were in first gear, that's the slowest, second gear is the second slowest, and it keeps going until you're at 5th, which is the fastest gear. And for the most part, we stayed in 3rd gear almost the entire time, which was pretty nice. You know, it was a nice cruising speed. We were going moderately fast, but nothing dangerous. About halfway through, I'm starting to feel some type of pain in my leg, and I'm like, man, is it the way that I'm sitting, or am I getting a cramp? The second I started to feel that, I was like, oh no, I cannot have a cramp while operating a motor vehicle. I am driving through a jungle with people behind me that are going about as fast as me, And I'm sticking my leg out off the side of the vehicle so that it doesn't cramp. I'm like this. I'm literally like it hurt. It hurt so badly. So what would you do? Would you keep driving and stick your leg out like I was doing, or would you stop like a sensible person? Well, luckily I had other sensible people in the group who were like, hey, you need to stop right now. You need to get off of your vehicle, because from their perspective, like the people behind me, this is what they saw. Like, that's not a good sign. But I got it figured out with mine, and I sat higher up, and I got it kind of fixed. I didn't look like a doofus anymore. So the rest of the ride goes smoothly, and eventually we get to a bit of a stopping point on a cliff. Let me just tell you, it was a beautiful stopping point. This is the last picture that would exist of me. There's a chance that day, this would be the final photo. This is the ATV, by the way. You know, by this time, I was getting pretty skilled with the ATV. And then we get to a little bit of a turning point in the ride. At this turning point in the ride, we see a little bit of a opening in a road. And it's like, oh man, wait. This is a wide open area for us to drive. It's like the length or the width of the road was about the width of 3 ATVs. So 3 could fit in like one line at a time. Because, you know, after my cramp, they kind of, the rest of the riders insisted that I stay right behind the guide. And I look up from my ATV, and the guide is holding up a 5. The guide is holding up a 5, which is the fastest speed you can go. Keep in mind, we've stayed at 3 or 4 this entire time. This is a whole new speed. I turn it up, and we start to get going. And I'm like, man, this is fast. I feel like I'm going like insanely fast. Apparently, the 2 guys started to speed up a little bit. And keep in mind, they were at the very, very back. And they come right next to my dad, like on both sides of him, and keep speeding up. And they are going like 3 or 4 times my speed. 3 or 4 times as fast as me. And they go from my dad, who's maybe 30 yards away, to me before he can even process what's going on. And while I'm just minding my own business, I hear a little bit of a like barely anything, and then suddenly this ATV passes right by me on my left. No warning. And it kicks up tons of dust into my face. And so I, a reactionary person, steer to the right. The other ATV is coming up on my right. So as this one is coming up right behind me on my right, I'm swerving where it's about to be. And if we had collided, this would have been a deadly crash. And I'm telling you that sincerely. I am not trying to be like, you know, it might have been a bit of an injury. It would have killed me, and probably him too. My poor dad is sitting there like 30 yards behind, watching this entire thing unfold in seconds. I, last second, swerved it out of the way, completely saving myself. Literally inches away from his tire. Inches. Literally that close. Any later, and I would have crashed into that guy, or he would have crashed into me, whichever way you want to think about it. And I take a moment to process this, and I'm like, man, that's kind of insane, because I'm still driving, you know, I'm behind them, I'm still driving, and I'm like, man, I could have just died. At the end of this road, there's a bit of an overhang where there's a bridge, and we stop there for some water. My dad, who watched this entire thing unfold, is obviously not happy with the 2 guys who were with us. He gets off of his ATV and walks towards them. He's like, hey, don't do that. Don't do that to my son. And I'm talking to the guide, like, I overhear this a little bit, but I'm talking to the guide. I'm like, yeah, it's my first time on an ATV. And he's like, oh, really? We told him at the beginning of the tour. He forgot. I'm kind of freaking out in my head, like, oh man, I could have just died. I'm so anxious about like the rest of the trip. My dad is freaking out at these two guys subtly, you know, he's trying to control his temper a little bit. And this guy has no idea what happened. we start to get going. Apparently the guy who came up on my right was like, okay, we heard you. We're not gonna do it again. We finally get to the end of the course. And you know how adrenaline turns into anger? We start to get in the shuttle and it's silent for a second. And then my dad is like, hey, Alex, we almost had an accident there. He tells the entire story to this random shuttle driver who he barely knows. He keeps calling him by name, by the way, which is super weird. He's like, Alex, I swear, and these are exact words, Alex, I swear, if that man had hurt my son, I would have killed him right there in that jungle. And I'm like, whoa, Dad, you're saying this to some random shuttle driver. and the shuttle driver's just sitting there like, yeah, that's crazy. Man, he was just sitting right in front of me in the shuttle, just making this face. And I was texting my girlfriend like, I almost died, lol. But yeah, that's the story of how I almost died in Belize. Actually, funnily enough, afterwards, after that little moment, guess how my dad and I decided to calm our nerves? We got coffee. Caffeine.